I feel that one of greatest injustices in our country today is that the access to quality education depends on your family's income or social status. I started understanding the caste system in India. I started understanding the inequity, the challenges, the urban-rural divide. Every human life is the same.
Yes.
And it needs to be treated the same way.
Sitting over here and saying it is what it is, the government should do this and the government should do that is not necessarily going to be enough.
I had decided I want to go to the Himalayas because I used to fantasize the Himalayas, and I was under the impression that I'm going to meet a lot of enlightened beings in the Himalayas. I just realized that they're as human as we are. There is no guru, there is no scripture, there is nothing that can help me till I work on myself.
You do have a lot of work with a lot of actors and sports personalities. Do you think that they are of a mindset to actively be a part of the change?
I don't see what the problem is in glamorizing, in the sense that
I love how delightfully optimistic your approach and outlook is to life. Hello and welcome to the Shezzi M Show. This is a podcast that highlights the vagaries of 21st century living and how to hack it. I am your friendly neighborhood Shezzi. This you already know. My guest today is somebody whose journey has been all about courage, compassion, and curiosity. At a very young age, he decided to show up and create the world that he wants to see. At a very young age, he decided that he needs to take action and not merely sit on talk. Out of this determination, Passionate Foundation was born, an organization that worked with government schools with volunteers to provide education to a lot of children who are otherwise overlooked. Moving on, he went on to co-found Teach for Change, yet another volunteer-based movement that has contributed to education for a lot, I would say tens of thousands of students in multiple states across the country. Let me also tell you, at the age of 17, this discerning gentleman was standing in the United Nations headquarters in New York, receiving the United Nations Youth Excellence Award for Community Service and Social Entrepreneurship. But this story is not only about organizational growth and personal reform. This is a story of spiritual enlightenment as well. At a very early age, he interacted with Swami Agnivesh, and he was so moved by that interaction that it led him to turn within. A very inspiring journey to the Himalayas. We're going to talk a lot about that. And he has decided to further his emotional education, ultimately leading him back home where impact meets lived reality. In democracy, in dialogue, in community, in citizens. And as a consequence, Democratic Sangha was born. A non-profit, non-partisan social reform organization that talks about human rights, civic education, and electoral reforms. And on that very illustrious introduction, allow me to introduce you to my friend, Chaitanya. Hi.
Hi, Shezzi, how are you?
Very well, and thank you so much for making it.
Thank you so much.
Chaitanya, it's been a very, very inspiring journey. And I know that you don't like to talk a lot about it, but let's take a walk down memory lane and go back to school. And
Sure.
in the 10th grade, something happened. What happened then, Chaitanya?
So, all through my childhood, I wasn't very good at academics or any of that. I've had a little bit of a difficult childhood. So with moving cities and, with not very stable family relationships. So it's been a little bit of a traumatic childhood, I would say. And then I was lost, kind of lost. Like, I was trying to figure who I was. I wasn't good at academics. I wasn't good at sports. Like, I didn't really know who I was. And then a lot of shift happened when I started moving schools, and then I joined this school called Abhyasa International School. That kind of changed everything for me. The shift was mostly my relationship with myself, because I felt for the first time I got seen. Like, it's so important to be seen. Until then, I was just like this invisible child sitting in the classroom who wasn't very good at anything, who was trying to figure what they want to do. And this was the first time I was seen. The founder of the school, who also was the principal, um, he, I don't know what got him thinking, but he chose me to be the manager for a department that was just created called the Rural Service Department. So this is like an international residential school in a village setup, because the campus, these schools need really huge land space. So it's set up in a village called Tupran in Medak district in United Andhra Pradesh. Now it's Telangana. So he chose me as the student manager for the rural service department. The school believed in value-based education. It used to involve us a lot of it used to involve us in a lot of community work in the village.
Right.
So my journey actually began then when I was entrusted with this responsibility as a student manager for the rural service department, and that was my first introduction to the ground reality. I started understanding the caste system in India. I started understanding the inequity, the challenges, the urban rural divide, all of this. So, our project was phased in two manner. One was firstly to understand what the issues were. So, first we would do a lot of survey, interact with the villagers to understand what their issues were. And the second phase of the project was to find solutions for that.
Right.
So through the school, we started working on the local government school. Then we started working on de-addiction camps because we realized that there was a lot of alcohol usage in the village. So these were the issues. Like we were also working on medical camps. We were working on food distribution camps. So these were the various projects that we worked on. So it so happened that when I was doing this work, I used to have a friend of my grandmother who was very closely associated with the United Nations. She was running a local chapter, the then chapter called the Andhra Pradesh United Nations Association. And when she knew about the work I was doing, and then she forwarded an opportunity to me, saying that there is an award of this sort and I'd like to nominate you for it. So at that point of time, there used to be a conference happening, the Youth Assembly at the United Nations. And I was nominated for this award, which is called the Youth Excellence Award. And it so happened that I was nominated for the award and they accepted my application and I received the award. And that's when I was introduced to how nonprofits work, what is happening. At that point of time, we were working on the Millennium Development Goals. So a lot of ambassadors from across the country, across the world came and spoke about their work with nonprofits and the Millennium Development Goals and the United Nations agenda to bring development and social change across the world. And coming back is when I realized that I was actually passing out of school,
Right.
graduating from my 12th grade, and I didn't want to stop the work that I started at this school. And that's when the idea of Passionate Foundation was born. And I went on to found a nonprofit at my 12th grade, which raised a lot of eyebrows.
Right.
Even the chief guest who had come to the event happened to ask my family and my school, saying that he's starting out so young. Like,
Yeah.
is it a impulsive decision or is it a well sought after? Has there a lot of thought that has gone into this decision? So yeah, this has been the journey with Abhyasa.
Quite impressive. And I believe your principal once very actively spoke about how that it could very well be a political career in store for you as well. Have you
Uh,
thought about that ever?
So initially, when I started off, yeah, there was thought about it. I did consider politics, but I do think that, as my journey unfolded and I started studying a lot of philosophy and all of that, I realized that there isn't much to be sought after in life, or there's nothing much to be achieved, to go out there and achieve. I'm very happy with the kind of work that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I was very ambitious when I started off. But then when you start reading a lot of philosophy and you start understanding life,
Yeah.
that kind of takes the back seat. So I'm not very much interested or inclined towards politics at the moment, but I'm very happy with the work that we're doing with democracy, strengthening democracy. I think I drive a lot of happiness and joy in the kind of work that we're doing at the moment.
That's fantastic. I mean, at 17, I was trying to figure out where I can go hang out for coffee with my friends. And here you were very sure. Um, I want to take a walk down memory lane and jump into the mind of a 17-year-old Chaitanya. What was going on? Was there a lot of fear? Was there a lot of determination? What was happening over there?
I don't think there was fear.
Hmm.
Fear, I realize, is something that you pick up as you age,
You're
with
right.
with experiences. with a lot of conditioning. Like Jiddu Krishnamurti talks about the conditioning of the mind
Yes.
and how this conditioning is framed by the experiences, the life experiences, memories, fear. Fear comes out of all of this conditioning. At that point of time, there is not so much of a conditioning. So I was quite fearless back then. I was very ambitious, like I said. There was kind of wonder. I was, going through this experience with a lot of wonder, the opportunities that were coming my way, the kind of learning that it was bringing to me. So there was a lot of wonder as compared to fear.
That's beautiful, Chaitanya. That's really lovely. I see a very clear inclination towards furthering education. Um, how did you decide that this is the area that I really need to contribute towards? Like, why education in particular?
So, like I said, ours was an international residential school with the best of the facilities, the food, the teachers, the quality of teaching, the methodology, everything was so good. And then when we would walk into this village, and that was when the first time I was exposed to a government school. And I understood that 70% of Indian children study in government schools.
Yes.
And today's government schools are far better than what it was about 15, 20 years ago. I feel that one of greatest injustices in our country today is that the access to quality education depends on your family's income or social status.
That's right.
So who are these 70% of the children that study in government schools? They are mostly coming from the marginalized sections of the society.
Yes.
The rich have access to private schools. They have access to very high quality education.
Yes.
That is because their family's income is such. So I realized that this was one of the most important aspects that needed to be worked on.
Yes.
If we want to develop India into the Vikshit Bharat that we are talking about today, education,
Yes.
access to quality education and equity in education is very important. And that's when I realized that that is an area that I want to work on. So through Passionate Foundation, we were mainly working on the infrastructure in government schools.
Right.
So we had selected one such school in Boinpalli, and we started working on that school to make it a model school.
Right.
So we started working on the infrastructure in this school, like bringing in benches. We had constructed a toilet in this school. The school that we were working in didn't even have a compound wall, because of which a lot of people would come and drink, and they would throw the bottles, beer bottles there, and a lot of them after drinking would use the restroom in this school. Like, it was not a very safe space. So we started working on this school to make it a model school. And that's when I realized that just working on infrastructure is not enough. While infrastructure is very important, like a child can't dream in a collapsing classroom, right? So that's when I realized that as much as importance is given to infrastructure, so much importance needs to be given to quality of education also.
Absolutely.
And that was the birth of Teach for Change. When we realized that when we were working in this school, one of the aspect was to involve the community in this school. And I clearly remember that we had one such volunteer turn up. She was an ex-Microsoft employee, and she had just turned a mother, and she had stopped working. And she signed up with us saying, I'll teach a classroom for 1 year. And then she started teaching the fifth graders in that school. And at the end of the academic year, when we were able to see that that classroom that she had taught was much, much better in terms of learning outcomes, discipline, outlook towards life. Everything was so much better in that classroom as compared to another classroom that we didn't have a volunteer. And that's when we formalized the program into Teach for Change, where the idea was that we bring in a lot more people like that who want to contribute, but they don't know how to do it.
Right.
And so the idea was to connect more volunteers to neighborhood government schools. So then they are able to go and share knowledge and inspire these kids, let these kids dream. And I truly believe that the potential is the same everywhere. It's just the opportunity which is lacking.
Absolutely.
The potential, the intelligence is universal.
Yes.
But the opportunity remains with a few. And that was the whole idea.
I very romantically said, oh my God, he went to the Himalayas and then he learned, and then from there, Democratic Sangha was born. But you tell me actually, how was Democratic Sangha born?
So early on, when I had got the award at the United Nations at 2007, Through Passionate Foundation, I was doing a conference called the Youth Assembly of India. And for the first Youth Assembly of India, we had invited a monk activist called Swami Agnivesh. He's no more. He passed away in 2020. But he's one of the most well known social reformers of the country. So when I happened to meet him and I happened to learn about his journey, his philosophy, his outlook towards life, something deep within me changed. And that's when I wanted that meeting inspired me to amalgamate activism with spirituality. So that's like when I used to interact with him, he always used to point out saying, charity only can do so much, but we need to work on systemic change. And that was a seed that he sowed in my mind,
Right.
which only transformed over the years.
Mm.
And with Teach for Change reaching like a movement and it reaching out to so many schools, I wanted to slowly pivot towards systemic change. And that was the birth of Democratic Sangha, where we wanted to work on strengthening democracy at the grassroots, work with different sections of society to strengthen democracy.
Yeah, fabulous, fabulous. Now that we have spoken about that big D word, democracy, and I feel like it's a little bit misunderstood in our country. Let's pretend like we don't know what it is. What should democracy look like, Chaitanya?
Democracy, a lot of people misunderstand democracy just as voting, but democracy is far beyond that. At Democratic Sangha, we run various programs. One of the flagship programs is called the Rural Women's Leadership Program, which is to activate leadership at the grassroots. So the program works with women from marginalized sections of the society. We form Mahila Sanghas, which are like women's collectives, and we have 25 such active collectives now in Karimnagar district.
Oh, wow.
And these collectives have done extremely well. At the end of the 1 year program, we have about 18 of these women who recently contested in the elections in Telangana for the Gram Panchayat elections. And about 11 of them won independently to the Gram Panchayat elections as ward members. So I see a lot of potential here. This leadership was within them. The program only helped them realize the potential in them. And we didn't even nudge them actually to contest in these elections. It was a choice that came from themselves. Initially, when they started with the program, they couldn't even speak. There's so much of conditioning and fear in them
Yes.
that even to open up in a Sangha meeting and to talk about their problems was a huge issue.
Yeah.
Today, it's very, very encouraging to see that 11 of them have won as ward members. And today, they're going to drive the change in their communities. Another program that we run is called the Young Leaders for Social Change, where we work with high school students to inspire them to be change makers. So the program is a 4-month leadership program for high school students. We are in the second cohort right now. The first cohort had about 15 students and the second cohort has about 22. And now we want to scale it to more schools to be able to bring it to more schools. So the core curriculum is which introduces them to 4 books and 4 workshops and then 4 internships, and it culminates with a visit to the parliament. So these are the programs that we are working with Democratic Sangha. And there is a core elections and voting program where we encourage people to go out and vote, to participate in elections. And we're also coming up with a program called Democracy Volunteers, which is mostly going to be a rural program where we are going to activate thousands of volunteers for democracy who are going to lead the grassroots change to strengthen democracy and to work with the people to involve them in democracy, which goes much beyond voting.
Right.
Democracy is something that we have to work on every day's basis. And democracy affects everything. It affects our bills to, our choices, to our rights. Everything is affected by democracy. And I think that's a huge myth that democracy is something that the politicians do.
Yes.
We want to change that narrative, that democracy is something we all work towards together.
Yes, beautiful. And it's a doing thing. It's a doing verb, okay? You're not just sitting in a corner in a textbook and saying, yeah, we're in a democratic country. You are also part of this ecosystem that contributes and feeds to this construct of democracy.
Yes.
So just sitting over here and saying it is what it is, the government should do this and the government should do that is not necessarily going to be enough.
Very
right?
true. Yeah.
And I think we need to also understand how much of a gift it is,
Mm.
how much of a duty it is as well.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. You spoke a lot about, like 70% of, children are going to government schools. Uh, and that the quality of education, of course, really makes a huge difference. You share that beautiful story of the lady from Microsoft who made such an impact. Let's take a look at the other 30%, and let's take a look at the educational paradigm in our country right now. Um, Not going to outright say, oh my God, it is such a flawed system. But if you were to identify a few things that we could really revisit in our educational system in the country, what do you think that would be?
So, like I said, 70% of Indian children still use the government schools as a medium of education.
Yeah.
And if you were to look at the ESSER report, which is published every year, you can see that about 50% of them studying in grade 5 can't even read a grade 2 textbook. That is what the ESSER report is saying, which means that for our public education system, we need to heavily invest in training our teachers. That is something that we need to do. And also, we need to shift towards a neighborhood schooling system, wherein it is a common schooling system where the rich and the poor will study together.
Oh, wow.
We need to build the neighborhood schools.
Sort of like what used to be in America. I
Yes.
don't know what's happening right now.
And I think that is going to change the way education functions in our country. That is going to change the way our country operates. And I do think we need to work towards that.
Is there something that you're going to work on?
In 2015, the Allahabad High Court had mandated that all Uttar Pradesh government employees should send their children only to government schools. But that never happened. The government didn't implement that ruling. And also, there is a huge flaw with the Right to Education Act. The Section 121C of the Right to Education Act mandates that at entry level in all private schools, 25% reservation must be done for children from economically weaker sections or from disadvantaged communities.
Right.
So even the Section 121C is not being implemented in majority of Indian states. So the flaws in our education system are because of this. If the rich and the poor were able to study together and get access to the same quality of education, the intelligence is the same, the ability and everything remains the same. It's only the opportunity that is denied for a lot of people. And when this opportunity is denied, for a lot of people to break the cycle of poverty is going to be very, very difficult because the rich are going to get richer by having access to quality of education and thereby to better opportunities. And the poor are going to remain poorer because they're not going to have access to the same quality of education that a child from a family that has higher quality of income is having access to. So this is the huge problem in our system today.
Are you hopeful that at one point, somewhere, maybe with all the activism that you're taking or somebody else is taking up, this could very well be a reality?
I have fought a lot. There is still a pending PIL in the High Court here,
Okay.
which an advocate friend of mine, Yogesh Tandava, has filed to implement the Section 121C. It hasn't been implemented. So I did personally also a lot of hunger strikes and I tried to do a lot of representation to the government to get the Section 121C implemented in Telangana, but that didn't happen.
And I mean, I know that you've done a lot of work with your understanding of the caste system and all of that also has been tremendous, but it is going to take some time, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I sense that too. We're speaking a lot about policy level matters or, changing the systemic change. But what are your, and I know for a fact that you're a yoga practitioner. What are your thoughts about the individual changing the microcosm, changing the macrocosm?
Hmm. So I'm inspired by multiple teachers. Like Karl Marx talks about how to change the society. Jiddu Krishnamurti talks about how you have to work on your mind.
Right.
And Advaita Vedanta talks about how both of these are not different. All of them are interconnected. So how I look at the inner and the outer work is that they are not opposing each other, but they have to work hand in hand. They're all very interconnected. And I see my inner and outer work as one movement rather than opposing each other.
Beautiful.
So that is how I look at my inner and outer work, because if I were to fight injustice with a lot of hatred in my heart and mind, I think I'm going to be very violent, and that's going to show up.
Correct.
And if I were to meditate and ignore all of the suffering, I would be escaping from the reality.
Yes.
So I look at my inner and outer work as one movement rather than something opposing each other. So I do try and bring a lot of philosophy that I study, lot of the learning from the yoga philosophy. When we talk about yoga, yoga is not just movement for me. Asanas is one part of it. In India, there is a lot of understanding that yoga is just like any other physical exercise. It is just the asanas. Asana is one element, you know. When we talk of 8 limbs of yoga, asana is one element to prepare you for the other elements of yoga. So the idea is to be able to bring a lot of philosophy that we study into the work that we do.
Fabulous. And I'm so grateful that you said that, because every time I talk about yoga, also, I keep telling them it's like saying your front door is your whole house. It's like saying asana is all of yoga, which is just, it's just irrelevant. But I'm so grateful also that you have shared that I don't look at the world separate, because I operate out of a place of I work on myself, and my external environment will match what is within, right? It's two coins of the same thing. It's just different perspectives. And I'm very grateful that you're sharing that. What do you think if I were to say something like, maybe the world just needs to regulate their nervous system and they will be the change that they want to see? What are your thoughts on that?
I do agree with that completely. Now we are seeing a huge movement towards yoga, towards regulating our nervous system. We are just so overregulated today with all of the screen time and everything that's happening in the world. We have way too much information that we are not designed to process.
Yes.
So, with so much happening, I do think that a lot of people are going to come towards philosophy, towards yoga, towards movement. And that is what is going to regulate our nervous system. And eventually, for a better democracy or for a better world, it's so much easier when people are more with regulated nervous systems. So yeah, I do see that shift happening, and I'm sure as a yoga teacher, you see that shift happening as well.
Yes. The five students were in my class, Chaitanya.
So a lot of people now understand, and they want to put in the inner work.
Beautiful. To Err is human, and we are here for the whole human experience. And
Exactly.
it's not like a linear process. Today I'm a saint.
Yeah.
Does not work.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. And I really believe that it's very, very important to be kind, to be compassionate,
Yes.
to be nice to people, because we tend to think that we are here forever.
Yeah.
But if you were to look at life, life's very, very transient, life's unpredictable. We're here for a very, very short period of time. And if we were to constantly remind ourselves of death, I constantly remind myself of death
Yeah.
and how all of this is transient and it's just going to end one day. So what is the point of having so much hatred or burning bridges with people and fighting with people? I think it's rather just to be here, to be loving and to be kind is very, very important.
Fabulous. I keep saying, when in doubt, just be kind.
Yeah.
And let that kindness begin with yourself, because a lot of times we are not kind with ourselves, are we? And that's, I think, where the hatred begins, because we already other ourselves. It becomes very easy to make the other person also like,
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. You spoke about the fact that, you want to be in this world and do the work. In fact, I had a yoga teacher who said it's very easy. You sit in the mountains for 6-8 months, and you're like you're an enlightened being. True enlightenment is when you are sitting over here dealing with anger, hatred, all of that, and still finding that inner calm. How difficult or how challenging is that to turn up every day in the face of all of this and still maintain your equanimity?
So, Shezi, I'll share my experience with you. So, in 2020, when I had turned 30,
Yeah.
I had decided I want to go to the Himalayas because I used to fantasize the Himalayas. And I was under the impression that I'm going to meet a lot of enlightened beings in the Himalayas. And I used to fantasize being a monk.
Yeah.
And that has been running on my mind for a long time. So in 2020, I decided I'm going to go to the Himalayas. And then it so happened that it's very funny. I contacted a monk on Instagram.
Wow.
Okay, I've been following this monk for a long time.
Right.
So I wrote to him saying, Swamiji, I want to. He has a small ashram on a hill in the town of Uttarkashi in the Himalayas. I actually wrote to him and I figured everything and I took off. I packed my bags and went to the Himalayas. I had no plan what I'm going to do. So I ended up there. I spent about 6 months in the Himalayan region towards Rishikesh, Uttarkashi, and all of these Himalayan towns. One thing that I've realized is that you are as happy or as miserable as you are in a city as you can be in the Himalayas.
Yes.
It is your state of mind which matters. Having said that, yes, the place makes a huge difference. Like when you're in the Himalayas, that stillness, when you realize, you look at these Himalayan mountains and you realize that you are nothing. You are a
I
speck of
respect.
dust, you know,
Yes.
and your existence doesn't really matter. But at the same time, you also realize that all of that existence is in your experience. And all our life is just to realize that these are different waves. One wave is called Chaitanya with a name and a form. One wave is called Shezzi with a name and a form. I have a birth and I have a death. And so much conditioning happens through religion, through society, through everything. But then to realize that the end of the day, we are all the same ocean and we are going to merge back into the ocean. I think that is the beauty of it all. So I did spend a lot of time in the Himalayas, but my work and family commitments, I had to come back after the 6 month journey in the Himalayas. I, frankly, to be quite, candid with you, I didn't find many enlightened beings in the Himalayas. I did come across a lot of monks, and some of them are very, very kind. They're all doing the inner work. They're full of love and kindness.
Yeah.
But then you come across all sorts of people, right?
Yes.
There are a lot of them who are unhappy there as well. So it is not about the physical setting that you live in, but it is the quality of the mind, the quality of the consciousness that you have. So at the moment, my idea is to work more with my consciousness, to be able to be a better human being, and to be able to meditate, to be able to find who I am. That is a question that I've been working with for a long time. Who am I is a question that I contemplate on. I know that I'm not this mere body or the mind or
Yes.
the thoughts that the mind is generating. I'm much beyond. I am life itself.
And it's a marathon. And if this lifetime is not enough, you have several more. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah.
Fabulous. Yeah. In fact, this is a cool trick for somebody watching this. Neti Neti. I am not this, I'm neither that. So what am I? Maybe you can sit down and put pen to paper and say, okay, maybe I am not my name. Maybe I am not this gender. Maybe I'm not this nationality. Maybe I'm not this professional qualification or this relationship. At the end of the day, who am I? And I'm so grateful that you shared that. It's something that I keep talking about in my yoga class as well. That, sit down with yourself for 5 minutes. You would probably be like, Shezzi, you're so lame. What nonsense. You probably might be onto something truly magnificent. You don't know unless you try. Try it.
So I used to fantasize about being a monk for the
Yes.
longest time, which I've stopped right now. Because reading a lot of Jiddu Krishnamurti philosophy, which I resonate with,
Hmm.
Jiddu Krishnamurti says there is no process, there is no guru, there is no,
Yes.
it can't be handed over to you. And he just talks about, because if something's handed over to you or if it is a process, it is time bound and it can't be so. So the idea is to be able to observe our own mind, and in the observation of the anger or the jealousy or the different conditionings of the mind itself, there is a transformation happening.
Beautiful.
Like how if light enters a room of darkness, the darkness automatically fades away. With observing the mind, there is a silent transformation happening. So I try to observe my mind every time I've committed a mistake or I'm feeling jealous or I'm angry. I try and observe the mind. And that in itself is very, very transforming as compared to some method where you have to sit and do a lot of, um, pranayama. There is value in all of that as well. I'm not denying the value in that. Yeah, there is a lot of value in the asana practice, in the pranayama practice. But just to be able to sit and observe the mind also makes a huge difference.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. And I mean, I've very, very familiar, deeply intimate with Jiddu Krishnamurti's work, but also because I studied in the Hatha Yoga, and not the Hatha style, but the Nat Sampradaya Hatha Yoga way, the marg. I also think of the importance of a guru, but you're right. You don't need to have a starting point is observing the mind. That itself is a great place to start. Are there any things that you do as a practice if you're comfortable sharing?
Sure. Yeah. So, Shezi, just to add to that also, I do think that there are different paths to the same goal.
Yes,
It's
there are.
leading to the same goal. And I feel all of these schools of thought, they are busy fighting each other,
Correct.
saying, my method is better
Better.
than yours, my guru is better than yours. You need to find what works for you
Beautiful.
and stop bashing the other method.
Correct.
Because if a method's working for you,
Yeah.
that may not be the same method that works for me.
Yes.
For me, a philosophical method, studying more philosophy, working with my mind, observing my mind is working for me. But somebody else, a pranayama, another method must be working. But where I do have an issue is that gurudom is something that has never appealed to me. It initially used to.
Hmm.
I spent a lot of time without naming any gurus. I've spent a lot of time with
I know.
gurus.
Yeah.
And I just realized that they're as human as we are. Like,
Absolutely.
we're all the same.
Yes.
For us, we tend to put a guru in a pedestal. And I really, really believe that there's no human being who is God. Like, we are all as much God as that guru is, right?
Yes.
So, to be able to place that guru on a pedestal and to worship the guru and to blindly follow what the guru says, which majority of people are busy doing that. I do think that takes away from the ability to work on ourselves.
Yes.
Then it becomes about the guru, the process of the guru,
The
the
method.
life. Yeah, the life of the guru. We fantasize the guru, what the guru eats, what the guru does. Then in all of these ashrams, there are stories built around the guru.
Yeah.
So that is something that has not appealed to me. If it's working for them, well and good. And now I've just come to the understanding that there is no guru, there is no scripture, there is nothing that can help me till I work on myself and to observe the mind, to use these practices. And today, like you said, what are the practices I use? I use different practices from different schools.
Beautiful.
Like I use the Jiddu Krishnamurti method. I use some method from Hatha Yoga, some asana and pranayama. Then I do a lot of meditation called the I am meditation, which focuses on how I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not the thoughts that these mind is creating. I am eternal, I am timeless. And how do I connect to that something that is eternal and timeless in me? So I'm trying to use different movement, and I am all for the new age movement also. Like I try and use red light therapy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I try and use I've done a lot of Pilates classes. I try and use a lot of other methods of movement as well.
Yes.
So I'm somebody who wants to look at it like with an open mind. I'm still exploring, and I also have to come to an understanding that nobody knows it all.
You're right.
We are just walking towards our grave. We're all walking together, and whatever is working for us is something that we should work on and not hate another method or judge someone. That is something that I want to work on myself also, to be less judgmental.
I love it.
Yeah. I don't know if any of this made sense,
It
what
made
I
a
said.
lot of sense. And
Yeah.
you said something really beautiful right now, that we're all, at the end of the day, walking towards our own grave. And this is a podcast that deals with finding hacks to deal with 21st century living. This probably is the first really, really impressive hack where you're saying, think about your death. Meditate on death.
Yeah,
At the
I
end of the day,
contemplate a lot on death actually.
yeah.
I read quite a bit of it. And, I'm trying to understand, like, every day, my life is a question, like, who am I? What am I doing? What is this life? That is something that I ask myself every day.
I think that's something that we don't do enough of.
Yeah.
I think that's where you get a sense of accountability also, of how you show up and turn up in the world.
Mm.
And that's decidedly lacking right now. You think Chaitanya, that something like this would go a long way in terms of how the world leadership turns up for mankind?
I do think if we get a little more contemplative in terms of leadership also, we are less likely to be hateful. Like, we come with so much conditioning that this is what my religion says, this is what my, scriptures say. Like, we're so much conditioned by everything that then we start looking at another person and hating the way they live. But at the same time, I do believe that we should never try and propagate or like rub something that I believe onto somebody else, and that's when the whole thing changes. Like you be and you let be. I think India has always been a land like that, that that practices what, like it has given place for every religion to practice what they want to practice. And I think that is the uniqueness and the beauty of this land, and we should try and protect that beauty of this land.
I think that's just beautiful. I think that's exactly what it is. It's time to, remember who we are,
Yeah.
and remember the goodness and the kindness. And in fact, in all the work that you do, and there's such a vast, impressive body of work that you do. When you set about doing something, the motive, I want to understand how your brain works. Is this coming from a place of service bhav emotion, or is it's just important to remember who we are? What do you place more important?
So, Shezi, the thing is, I've never taken myself very seriously. Like, I don't try and position myself a certain way or call myself like a service oriented or anything of that sort. I've just continued to do the work. Like, this is also one of the first podcasts that I'm doing. Like, I'm very, very uncomfortable in front of the camera. I try and avoid as much. I just continue. I like to live like a nobody. I think I found like a peace and a beauty in that. Um, while it works for a lot of people to do the kind of exposure, to be on Instagram, to do videos, to put yourself out there, there is a need for that, and there is a beauty in that. I have not found a need or a comfort zone in that as yet. So my work, like I said, for me, the inner and the outer work go together. I can't meditate and ignore someone's suffering, because then I feel like the inner and the outer, it's like one movement, like I told you. They should not be opposing each other. So while I operate, I don't operate from a place like my blood boils when I see injustice. That is something that I've learned from Swami Agnivesh and a lot of other monks that I have been with. They all operate from a deep place of love. And I think that comes from this thing where, um, according to the non-duality philosophy that we study, that all of us are just one consciousness, so there is no other. So when there is no other, you just try and help as much as possible. You just operate with love, with service, and someone's problem should move you. I think that's what makes us human. So I try to be as kind as possible. I do, like I told you, I'm not trying to say that I'm a saint. I have my issues. I do fight. I do like do a lot of things like as human to do a lot of errors, but I do apologize. I do make it up for it. And if I've ever wronged someone, I'll go up to them and I'll apologize. I have no problem that way to apologize or to say sorry.
Yeah.
But to operate with love from the place of love, to realize that it's just we're all one consciousness.
Beautiful.
That is important.
Lovely, lovely. And, I think also this is just a great reminder for all of us to literally turn up and be the change we want to see, put ourselves in the other person's shoes, and be as empathetic as possible. And that's pretty much it. Life is so, like I said, non-linear. Today I'm doing really well. Tomorrow I'll probably be like ready to like growl at somebody. It's fine. You walk the human path and just turn up with kindness. Beautiful. You spoke a little while ago about, not having a sense of otherness.
Yeah.
Like as within, so without, and as within, so without. So it's all the same, right? And I know for a fact that when you are doing these events like for Teach for Change and stuff like that, there is a common room where there is privilege and non-privilege meeting. How do you help make sure that there is no otherness created in a room such as that?
I do come across a lot of people who do not want, who want to divide the society in terms of, social hierarchy and the caste system and things like that. Like I said, Shezi, I do look at myself as a misfit in the society. I don't quite, like, know how to handle such situations, because for me, like for example, when I'm moving and if I am with someone, like I don't differentiate at all. Like I'll sit at the same table and eat. I can't differentiate even in terms of like these are some things that I learned from Swami Agnivesh also. Like I was once driving, I have seen that wherever we were driving, we would go to the most remotest places and all of that. He would always be so kind to the person who is driving him. He would want to know everything about their life, that kindness, that love. So I try and operate from the same place of kindness and love. If I am eating, I'll ensure that whoever is working also sits at the same table and eats and all of that. But I understand in this society that is not the society that we live in.
No.
There is a lot of differentiation, hierarchy, and all of that. So, but at the events and all of that, I try and avoid as much as possible. Like at the recent event, we had all of these rural women from our program come
Yeah.
to the Changemaker Awards that we did, the annual forum. We treat them with utmost respect. Like we give them, like it's not something that we give them. Like, you know, every human life is the same
Yes.
and it needs to be treated the same way.
And you think that more of these events are going to kind of help drive the point home that at the end of the day we really are all one?
I don't know if events are going to do that, but if we were to bring in more philosophy, like if we were able to move away from a society which is so ritualistic and dogmatic and move towards more of a philosophical society where this philosophy can be taught to us quite young,
Yeah.
that we are all the same. At the end of the day, we are all one consciousness. And this is all human created barriers. All of that we create, it's all a human mind. It's coming from a human mind from conditioning. I think then we would like lead to a better society where everyone's equal.
I agree with you. In fact, now that we have spoken about, like all these events and stuff, I know for a fact that a lot of times people will be like, yeah, it's supposed to be for charity, but there is just so much glamour involved in all of this. What do you have to say to that?
I don't see what the problem is in glamorizing in the sense that I have come from a background of, so basically after my MBA, I was running a PR company for the longest time.
Hello.
Yeah. So I used to do a lot of lifestyle PR and, you know, work with designers and
Right.
brands and,
Right.
you know, lifestyle PR basically. So I think that has rubbed off a little bit on my work as well.
Correct.
So initially I used to see a little bit of a concern with, you know, but today in a world that we live that nobody really cares. It is just the human mind's conditioning that wants to look at it from that angle. But otherwise, I don't see any issue at all.
Fair point. In fact, I'll tell you what, I'll go one more step further and tell you, Chaitanya, that if there is a way that you can leverage that for the
Exactly.
greater good,
Yeah.
then please do.
Yeah. If you look at the largest organizations in the world, like the United Nations, that is the world's largest non-profit organization, right? The United Nations has goodwill ambassadors. Why do they have goodwill ambassadors? Because it's so much easier to propagate their work, to get the work to the grassroots through having such ambassadors who can work for them.
Yes.
So I don't see any point in any problem
Flaw.
in involving actors and celebrities and sports people to be able to take the work forward.
I know that we're talking about spirituality and all of that, but I do want to know that you do have a lot of work with a lot of actors and sports personalities. Uh, do you think that they are of a mindset to actively be a part of the change?
I do believe so because through this work, I've come across some amazing human beings. Like, you know, I've had the opportunity to work, like, interact with heads of state.
Yes.
Like, I was invited by the Obama Foundation when President Obama was here and he was organizing a town hall and he addressed a lot of young people. So I was invited to be part of that town hall. So I have been in gatherings where I've met heads of states. I've worked closely with a lot of chief ministers and actors and all of that. And I do think that a lot of them are driven to bring change.
Right.
Like, I'm not sure if I can take names, but like, say, I have closely worked with Dia Mirza. I think she is amazing. She truly believes in what she is doing. And there is a lot of um, like credibility to her work. Like she supports and chooses projects where she knows that she can make a real difference.
Yes.
So there are a lot of celebrities like that who are doing the amazing work that they're doing and supporting nonprofits scale their work.
Yes.
So yeah, I do think that there are a lot of celebrities who do want to bring real change. And today's time, nobody is doing it just for the eyeballs. Those days are gone. I think there used to be a time where just to look good, there would be a lot of celebrities associating with non-profits, but that's not the case today.
I must tell you, I love how delightfully optimistic your approach and outlook is to life. And
Yeah.
I also feel that this is exactly what the world needs. We need a little bit more of, yes, I believe in the goodness of people. Yes, I believe that people are nice. I was having a chat with somebody else recently and saying, I think when we move past this sad conditioning of, oh my God, there is so much hatred in the world, the borderline reality is that people are good, people are nice, and we should allow them that opportunity to show us who they are and how nice they are.
So a teacher I study with says that you look at the goodness in someone that they themselves can't see,
How beautiful.
and that's going to transform them. He always says that it's so good, it's so easy to look at the flaws of people, but if you were able to see the goodness in them that they themselves can't see,
Yes.
that will really blossom them into a really beautiful human being.
I love this. In fact, this is a cool tip for anybody that you're feeling absolute anger towards or saying that, oh, there's XYZ wrong with. Find 5 things good about them. And while we're at it, find 5 good things about you. If that is taking too long, then you know that you have a problem. It should not be too difficult to find good things about you. And I noticed that that's a fundamental core problem with a lot of us right now. We are not able to accept that there is something nice about us, and that kind of reflects how our perception of the world turns out to be. Um, I'm going to go back to work on yourself, and the external environment will work itself out.
Yeah,
Right?
very true. Yeah. Like life works inside out, they say, right? Whatever is within is what's going to reflect
Reflect.
outside in the world.
Is there anything in particular that over the last decade or so you really, really believed in and you said, that was not correct?
So yeah, like with my own journey, to be able to, I used to fantasize like a lot of things, like about everybody in the Himalayas is like
Yeah.
enlightened, and I need to find my life's purpose. Like those things were something that I used to really like work towards. But
Yeah.
now I've just come to understand that to live this life, to go through this experience itself, is life's purpose.
That's fabulous. That's really, really fantastic. I hope people are sitting down and taking notes because these are such valuable, like, I don't know if there was a better candidate to talk about life hacks. And I must tell you this, Chaitanya, the whole purpose of the podcast and what it represents, 21st century living and how to hack life, is for us to look for these basic common sense approaches which don't seem common sense at all to a lot of us. I'm so moved because I know a lot of people, even in like the yoga space or the spirituality space, are like, what is my purpose? What is my dharma, etc. Right? But the reality is that this what you have shared is going to be it for me. It was such an eye opener of a moment. Your purpose of life is to live.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
fabulous. Is it a silly question to ask? What next?
So I've never strategized. Like I told you, I don't take myself very, very seriously.
Hmm.
I've never strategized my career or I want to be here in 5 years. That is not something that I've planned.
Right.
But for some time now, like because of like I live with my grandparents
Yeah.
and my life is designed around them.
Yeah.
So I have to take care of them. So I'm going to continue to do the work that I'm doing. So while I'm building democratic Sangha, my work is more as a social impact strategist. I work with a bunch of nonprofits trying to strategize impact for them. I'm going to be doing this for a while now. Eventually, the idea is to be able to dedicate the rest of my life to find that answer as to who am I, to be able to lead a life where I'm able to meditate every day, to be able to contemplate, to be of value to some people, to be able to serve. Whether I'm going to become a monk or not is a question that I'm going to explore. I've kept it aside for now. But eventually, the idea is to be able to dedicate my life to work with consciousness.
Fair point. Are you the sort of person who believes that I must know all the answers, or do you trust that as I walk, the path will unfold?
I used to be the person who used to think that there are people out there who know it all and I should know it all.
Correct.
It was also at that point, I think, the ego operating,
Yes.
But then I realized spending a lot of time with a lot of, monks and so called realized people that nobody knows it all.
Nope.
Everyone's trying to figure it out.
I think this is another very cool 21st century hack you have shared, my friend, that we are not meant to know all the answers.
Yeah.
Do your best and then leave the rest, to whatever you believe in.
Yeah.
Chaitanya, a little while ago you mentioned how you live with your grandparents and you take good care of them, which is really cool, by the way, and very sweet. I'm guessing that their influence would have been quite tremendous even in your childhood.
So it's the other way. Me taking care of them is not so much, but them looking out for me. Their love has really grounded me, and it makes me feel, at the end of the day, we all are love beings as human beings, and we want that love. And I think with both of them, I get that unconditional love with my mother and my grandparents, and that has shaped me quite a bit. I get some valuable lessons from them, like how organized they are, even in this life, like at this stage of their life, how they organize their day to the kind of work that they do. They're very, very responsible. So I pick up a lot of things from my grandparents.
But what are their thoughts about all the activism that you do? Because, I tell you, in traditional households, everybody is like, how much money are you making? What career advancement are you doing? What is happening, etc., etc. Nobody really encourages like social reform, activism, going deep within. So, how are they reacting to
So
all
my
this?
family has been very, very supportive
Yeah.
through this journey because initially they did have a lot of, doubts as to, what am I trying to do? Like, am I going to be okay and all of that. But when they see this kind of conviction, like, when I'm trying to chart my own way, they have come to understand that this is what I'm going to do. And they have come to accept it. Initially, they did have a little bit of an apprehension and they used to get worried. Even now, they kind of worry, with the kind of work that I do. It does expose us to some sorts of risks, and you're not always on the right side. You're trying to figure it out. So it does kind of concern them, but they've come to terms with it.
Wonderful. In all this entire conversation, I'm seeing a person who is so self-assured and so sure in his own skin. Has there ever been a moment of self-doubt where you have wondered, okay, what am I doing? Am I doing the right thing?
Shezi, now over the last 3 years or 2 years, life hasn't been very kind to me. Like I have had experiences where, um, you know, like, I have had to build the resilience to be able to get myself up again. So I am not the same person that I used to be. Like, I'm trying to constantly evolve, like, mend my ways to get myself right. I was not at all confident in myself for the longest time. But I've tried to rediscover myself. When you understand a lot of philosophy, when you read this, no, it empowers you. And the teacher I've been studying with, he talks a lot about how to be desireless and fearless. Even Jiddu Krishnamurti heavily talks about desireless and fearlessness is godliness.
Yes.
So I'm constantly trying to work on myself with this. And I think that brings a lot of confidence in us as well.
I keep talking about this so much. Abhayam.
Yeah.
Live through fearlessness, and therein lies our salvation. And I'm really grateful to you for highlighting that.
Yeah.
And in fact, there is something I do want to ask you, because I ask all my guests on this podcast, since this is a podcast that highlights the vagaries of 21st century living and how to hack it. If there was one particular hack that you swear by and that has really held you in good stead, could you share that with viewers?
Sure, I think one hack that's helped me is like most of us, I have a racing mind. I have racing thoughts. And there are days I feel good and there are days I don't feel good. It's bound to be. I have seen the greatest masters also like this. It's just human this way.
Yes.
To go through the ups and downs of life. And that's why Buddha called this life a suffering, because your mind is your biggest enemy. And with constant exposure to Instagram, to picking up fights with someone, to the stress, the sheer amount of stress that we go through in today's life. So one thing that I try and do is when I'm really low, I'm trying to look at my mind and say, okay, now the mind is saying this. It's saying I'm worthless, I'm unhappy, I am sad, I am, I'm whatever the mind is saying. And when I'm happy, also I look at the mind and I say, okay, now the mind is saying this. When you're able to establish that it is the mind which is constantly through this ups and downs, it's, the happiness, the unhappiness, it's constantly taking you through this. And when you observe the mind and you understand this, is when there is a certain space that is created, and that creates very silent transformation. I think that is a hack that helps me.
Chaitanya, it's been an eye opener of a conversation. I have thoroughly enjoyed the joy with which you have sat down and the honesty and the love with which you have spoken to me. And I wish you absolute success in everything that you do, because everything that you do with such a place of love.
Thank you, Shezzi. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for holding the space to be able to share this. Yeah.
Thank
you.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I'm going to link details. I don't know, he's a very private person. But if you have any questions that have come up about education, about infrastructure, about democracy, about philosophy, do drop your comments, and I'm sure that I can request him to kind of come and add his 2 words there. Thank you. We will see you in the next one.